if you go to DeSimoneHQ.com and hit the blog, we are helping Heather Lappin pay her legal bills. She's over $20,000 in the hole running against Chris Nanos. So need your help. And so if you can throw her a few bucks, that would be great, because she stepped up for all of you guys. And then let's not forget her on the back end of all this. So we'll make it happen. Good morning to Ted Maxwell.
Morning, Chris.
SALC. What's up, sir?
Oh, it's a beautiful Monday morning.
You wore the tie, the green one. Good job.
I wasn't going to disappoint. I mean, it's been a long time. Now that we're on, you can see us.
Yes.
I kind of got out of wearing the tie to your show because it was,
correct.
In the morning it was kind of casual, kind of relaxed. But now, we got to sport. And I'm glad you called me out on it, because by that time I was just packing everything up in the car, and so I didn't even hear it. So it's just
this is all natural. This wasn't Ted had it. So 414. What a whipping!
It was pretty amazing, the outcome. I can truly say when I saw the first results, I was floored. I actually felt pretty good that morning coming in. I just had a sense that it was going to go down.
Yeah, that was my prediction, was going down, but not that big.
Not that big. I mean, that was huge, and that tells you a couple things. It tells you it's amazing how quick a lot of the writers in this town will change from, it's going to pass, it's going to be overwhelming, it's going to do that, to, it was dead from the start. I mean, it was instant on some of the articles that came out in the days following 414. But that does tell you that it probably was in some ways dead from the start. I mean, it helped that there was a united voice behind it. It helped that there was a unique united voice, a bunch of strange bedfellows coming into agreement on this being bad. But it just goes to show that 9.2 is not going to be acceptable to the region. And it's one of those ones I've already been hearing pushback. Well, RTA is a sales tax. That's true too, and we can talk about that later in the show today. But it came down to a single municipality trying to go to 3.1% of their portion. Yeah, I mean, that's state sales tax. It comes across. You've got your city, you've got your counties, and then you got your municipalities. They all add to it. But when it's 3.1 from a single one of those municipalities, that just pushes it 50% higher than the area right around it. It just doesn't come across as fair, even-handed, or justifiable.
So
you just can't justify it, especially for what the results are.
So to me, when you have a whooping like that citywide in the city of Tucson, that has to be really, the whooping comes from the Democrats voting against this thing, correct?
There's no doubt. 70%. It will be great when we get the details that show what the yes-no breakdown was between the parties.
Right.
Because I think you're going to see a lot more. I know there were Republicans that were voting yes as well. Don't assume there weren't. There were a lot of, we heard people say, well, I can afford it. I want to contribute. I want it. Well,
Fletcher McCusker threw $10,000 at this piece of crap.
Those are the other sides to watch. Let's take a look at the final numbers of where the money came from. I think the money, maybe it was a challenge. Maybe without the business community supporting the proposition, or the mayor and the council, it was harder for them to raise money. I know they were leaning heavily on the police and fire unions. But as you showed on your show, and there were many other things, there wasn't 100% unanimous support for police and fire. From police and fire, not for, from. We know there are those. We know there are those out here who don't want more. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to sell the public on these large capital investments going to be making a significant difference in response times, when the only thing people care about is getting a response. They want to know that police and fire are there when they need them. And when the chief tells you right now that even on their type 1 or the highest level calls, they've got 6-minute response times, that's unacceptable unless you have manpower, certified officers.
When seconds count, we'll be there in
it's gonna be different.
20 minutes.
Yeah. And then we get to even on the policing of the streets, speeding, red lights. Everybody talks about that all the time, the number of pedestrian deaths. But you just look at the number of motorcycle cops that are down.
I know.
To where we are now. There's just not enough folks out there on the street enforcing the laws.
So a question I have is, and maybe Bill Beard he's usually paying attention to these things, is when we look at the turnout of Democrats and Republicans on the 414 vote, did one come out larger than we thought?
I think the Republicans did a great job of showing it.
Now you say that, that they did a great job, but did they actually, the numbers of Republicans show up was above what they thought?
What we got on Tuesday, what was released Tuesday, and we don't know, I have not seen, and I was kind of looking to see if I could find them. I have not seen the final total number of voters that submitted. We're, of course, waiting the yes-no outcome, and we should get that, I believe, today or tomorrow at the latest. 36% of the Republicans voted, which is high for an off-cycle, particularly an off-cycle election. But in the city of Tucson, generally the turnout rate is higher amongst the Democrats.
Sure.
33% of the Democrats had voted. Now we'll see who actually dropped the ballots off at the ballot and see if those were predominantly Democrats or Republicans.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, last year was about a 24%. As of last Tuesday, it was 28% and had already voted. And that's without the 6 to 8, 9,000 that we got on election day. So I believe that there was a good turnout of Republicans, and I will give my understanding is the party was doing a lot of the ground game, and they were doing it in a manner that wasn't coming across as partisan. The one thing that we were told time and time again when we talked about this is don't make the vote partisan. If it becomes partisan, you lose in the city of Tucson. We know that.
Right.
So you've got to keep it on the issues, and having some of the the homeless advocates, some of the housing advocates, some of the others be very vocal. You got to give April Putney credit, and on that side, she was vocal and out there. She showed up at all the community gatherings.
I love that she had to take on Romero and Santa Cruz in the same forum. That is the best.
I have yet to see that forum.
Go watch it.
It's
great.
So you found it now. It is public.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
It wasn't up initially.
They did delay it, but the best part is the guy who's the Tucson of Greater Democrats, a Greater Tucson guy, literally admonishes the mayor.
I heard that wasn't a moment. That's why there was a lot of people thinking it's not up and it maybe won't go up. And there's a lot of people talking about that because it was. You've got to give the credit to everybody that helped get out the vote. But the fact that it was 70-30 says the underlying principle of what they were trying to do was not perceived well. And remember, this started as being public safety. The first time I heard about it almost 19 months ago, it was from the union heads saying they wanted to go back and get a half cent because they were cut out of 411, just cut out. I mean, like 2 weeks notice, you're not going to be part of this.
Yep.
And that was, they were getting 60% of that 101 money that turned into 411. And now all of a sudden they're getting nothing. So they wanted to go for a full half cent. And there was a lot of concerns. There was a lot of things. We talked a lot about sunsets. And I think the 10-year sunset on this one didn't help it at all either. But
you think it should have been shorter or longer?
Shorter.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing on the 10-year with 411 on the roads. Okay. The 10-year 411 on the roads. They actually had a plan that showed how they would get to all the neighborhoods and why it would take 10 years to get all the neighborhood roads in some state of better repair. They could justify it. On 414, all you saw was, other than the police capital, everything else was an example of a one-year budget.
Right.
An example. No guarantee that it's going to go to this program or that program. And it was Christmas trees. So it didn't. A five-year sunset would have been more acceptable to some, but 10 years of you're giving us a one-year example? Well, it doesn't work.
Let me ask you this. So I really believe that when we talk about how they were leaning on the police and fire unions for money, they could have raised $400,000 and it still would have get whacked. That's how bad this is.
So it goes back to 411. 411. Somebody in the city had asked me before 411, how much money do we need to raise for this to pass? And I said, honestly, 100,000, 150. It's neighborhood streets. It's going to be an easy push. There's going to be no opposition, other than some folks who are going to be against it because it was a tax, no matter what. And I said, you need about 100,000. Oh, no. We're going to raise 400,000. And they did. They went out and raised 400 and some odd thousand. And I got reminded of that afterwards because it was, look, it passed with 74%. And I said, yeah, if you had had 100,000, you could have passed it with probably 62.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
But all their buddies need the extra $3 million to make payroll for the next 20 years.
There was no doubt, that if they had raised 400, 500, it wasn't that that wasn't going to make a difference in this one. This one was not well received from the get-go. And again, it started as police and fire for a half cent. They knew there was going to be some that was probably going to go to comms, and they were willing to discuss that. But it slowly turned from being the full 100% public safety to 2/3, or even maybe a little lower. And that difference then was spread. And what I talked about a lot was all those items, the homeless, the housing first, none of the money was significant enough to make a difference. Would it be helpful? You bet. Anybody who runs a nonprofit will tell you, if you can give us money that we can put forward to our mission, it's going to be helpful. But none of it was in an amount that was going to make an significant impact or even a real dent. Would it change some people's lives? You bet. But would it fix the problems? Would it get the folks not doing public use of drugs? No, it wasn't going to change any of that. So nobody saw it being something that was a fix.
But even if they got the money, right? Because I've talked to different friends who either work in the city manager's office or used to work in the city manager's office, and I say, let's say the city of Tucson had Romero had an uncle, really rich, like George Soros type level, and he gave them an extra $200 million a year. Would the city get better under this leadership with an extra 200 for the next 20 years? And the answer from all these people is no. Right? Because they're the most inefficient users of taxpayer dollars I think I've ever seen.
It's one of those things that comes down to how the money's allocated and how it's used and how it's put forward. And let's go back to public safety. Item number one going forward, it's got to be to increase the number of officers we have on the street. It has to be to increase the pay raises. You can say that the city of Tucson police pay salary right now is equivalent to a lot of the other municipalities here, but that's not who they're competing with.
Maricopa's kicking their butt. Yep.
And they've got to understand that you are a city of, and I know they know this, 500,000+ people. You've got the problems they've got up there, not the ones we have in Oro Valley, not the ones that are existing in Marana, Sarita. And if you're a public servant and that's what you want to do for your life, and those are your choices, I mean, I think the chief understands that very well.
Why would you go to Tucson to work other than money right now?
I mean, yesterday driving home after dinner went up Oracle, somebody was pulled over. 3 police cars there. That was the activity. That was the activity for the evening.
So last week we had Jamie Voss on. He's the officer who wrote that memo to the city of Tucson on how bad it is out there. Right. And him and Nate came on last week, and they were amazing. And Officer Voss, we were talking about it. First of all, the 748 deployable officers is not the real number.
Right.
The number's 300. Is what it is. For actual guys like Jamie, who is a actual deployable with a gun officer in the streets, it's 300 for a town of 540,000 people and 200 square miles. Unacceptable. And so that's why I like Chad too much. I don't want to get in a fight with the guy, but he keeps throwing that 748 crap out there. That's not real.
So this is where the opportunity comes. And there's a lot of people that want to celebrate and say it was a killing, and we can tell them what to do. No, you can't. No, that's that. It's this.
You just staved off the most recent crappy idea.
This is about working with those in office, and people say you can't do that. You've got to change those.
Hold on, didn't she invite you to? Didn't the business leadership get invited to Forum 414 with her?
The challenge is we have to come forward with the positives now, okay? And I think this is an opportunity. Already reaching out to
there's
Chad.
No positives. She's not gonna. She's gonna listen to you.
Oh, we'll find out.
You sound like a guy who thinks the stripper liked her because you gave her $20. That's what you sound like to me.
I know better than that. Here's the challenge of working in public policy that some people don't understand. They love to complain, they love to bitch, and they love to whine. You're working with the elected officials you've got.
Yes.
Unless you can change them.
Correct.
Okay. So listening on driving in this morning, CD7. I'm glad we're finding a Republican candidate to run. They won't win. They won't. It's a reality of the district.
We're still a plus 40D, right?
Yes. It's a reality of the district.
Yep.
So you have to work with the folks that are in office. That's what we do in trying to bring in public policy.
So what
The
you're
thing is,
saying,
we've got to
after
come
what you've seen out of these 7 folks on the board on the city council, that you think if the business community brought them positive ideas, they would actually go with any of them?
I didn't say they'd go with them. Here's the opportunity for change. One, there's 7 different voices on that council, and I think some of them sometimes stay mum, don't talk on some issues that they may or may not agree
Hold on,
on.
got a cough. Cunningham. Anyway, sorry.
So this is an opportunity. That's a 70-30 defeat.
Yep.
Okay, the one quote that I saw afterwards that really bothered me was when Mayor Romero was saying, okay, we want, the No campaign says they've got some of the answers. We want the answers. Well, we're going to work and try to bring some answers from our side. I'm sure April Putney and her organization is going to bring some answers as well. But it was the last line in that first statement. Now, it was made the night of the election, so that maybe there's something. We need to get some good answers and put together a package that the voters will vote for. No, the argument against this was we don't need another half-cent sales tax.
Yep.
That was the argument against it.
Incorrigible.
Because we're support public safety. And now's the time to reach out to Chad Kazmar, to reach out to Chief Ryan and say, okay, what is it you need the most? What will make an impact and improve this community? And then find out how to put it in. Now, the cities, they said the only option they have is a sales tax because they're limited by the charter. All right, let's open the charter. Let's look at what can go into the charter that would give you opportunity to have some more funding. But more importantly, let's take a look at what the priorities are inside your budget. And let's make sure that you're fulfilling them. The amount of money that went up that the city manager at the study sessions over the days spent for public safety, because the number we kept harping on was the 30% on police out of the general fund. All right, we're having the general fund argument because that is now the discussion of what's controllable. We kept harping the 30% because that's what it was. If you combine police and fire, it got up to about 67%. But the fact of the matter is there was a report done by the Common Sense Institute that talked about if you combine police and fire in the city of Tucson, the percentage of the total funds going just gets equal to what's spent in per person, dollars per person, in some of the towns in Maricopa and Mesa and in Phoenix. It's just getting to the equal point. By the time it was done at the last study session, the city manager, Tamir, and he's said that over 80%, they really looked at it hard, and over 80% of it goes into public safety out of the general fund. That's flat out can't be true. If that's what it is, then I don't know how you're funding all the other things that you've claimed, and you're showing lines in what you're cutting. The biggest challenge that the economist had that we hired to do a dive at the city's budget was...
This is Rounds?
Yes, Jim Rounds' report. The biggest problem he said he had was really finding how everything was spent. And they talked about it. Even Manager Tamir said at the study session, not all the cities categorizes everything the same. Okay, well, let's start there. Let's categorize everything so that it's an easy number to find. And I understand there's different lines and different things. You have to have that, but that doesn't mean you can't roll them all up into a category that makes sense. And everything under public safety, you can go, oh, here's the money direct from police salaries.
Act like professional adults when you're doing your budgeting? Is that what we're saying?
Rolling up, but the easiest way to present anything to a board and to the public would be to roll up the numbers and have the ability for the folks to be able to pull down that list and see what all things go into that rolled up number. But when you talk about, well, we've got this amount for this and this amount over here and we pull it over, it's really for public safety. And we can't touch any of those things in the enterprise funds, like water and some of those other things. They're right, they can't. But you've got to remember that $1 billion. So $1 billion is in programs they put in place either through.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Here's my question. So they're at a $2.4 billion budget. They're currently in biggest one in the history of the entire city.
And that they don't like hearing that, but that is the budget. That's what it says. That's what their documents say.
I'm just doing line graphs from 1920 something. Right? It's the biggest one ever. So getting to this point of hitting a more sales tax, or they keep saying they're going to have no money and all of this stuff. Is this just bad mismanagement of funds? Because that's what it looks like to me, is between Ortega, who's supposed to be good at this, and Tamir, This is a bad mismanagement of funds to me. If they're saying they're crying poor, they didn't know that, like they were just. One more thing, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So they were saying that.
It's your show,
I know, but still, it's the idea that did they think? Well, here's the thing: was the main crux of the budgeting going into as we move from this budget year to the next year, Trump losing?
That's what they want to make it sound like.
I mean, that's literally what they did. They Trump's losing. Kamala's for the win.
That's the one thing Mayor Romero did very effectively was get federal dollars to go into programs. Now, some of those dollars that are coming in, and it's big numbers come in, they also come with federal restrictions, and that creates a more difficulty in getting projects done and some other issues. So there's pros and cons. But when they talked about that 2.4, and then they talked about the 750 for the general fund. And they're right. I think it's 757 or 756 is their general fund, which is truly their discretionary. But it's the same thing as the federal government talking about what they've got. Defense makes up 50% of the discretionary funding. The rest is made up by other programs. But the majority is stuff the federal government can't do unless they're willing to make the cuts.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, yes, the enterprise system they don't need to touch that. Tucson Water is actually giving, I believe it's $12 million, more than $12 million into the general fund this year to help offset the cost. So there's profits coming out of Tucson Water that in the 26 budget go into the general fund.
So you mean they can give back all the money they screwed on the people that lived outside of the county?
That's the challenge. They're using that. They're using that to make money for the general fund, and they're allowed to. It's an enterprise fund. It's set up as a business. It's running. Apparently, it's running as a profitable business.
But a judge said that their increase was illegal.
We get to the responsibility of regionality and what everything was going on. And regionality in this region is a very tough issue to broach, as we know.
That's true. Let's get a call in before we go to break. We're hanging out with Ted Maxwell, Southern Arizona Leadership Council. Billy Beard, I mentioned you 4 times in the last 10 minutes.
It's like if you called him, you've got this
like Beetlejuice. I say Bill Beard 3 times and he shows up. Happy birthday, happy Pliskin Acres, happy St. Patrick's. Go.
Yes, thank you. Listening to what Ted was saying, I'm reminded of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and mayor and council are behaving like Veruca Salt. They're basically, they want it all, they want it now, and they're going to be the petulant little child and demand that the folks that have told them, no, you can't have more money, you come up with an alternative. And they're going to sit there and they're going to pout and they're going to cross their arms and they're not going to listen to anybody else until the reality hits them that you don't have any more money, even though you're spending more than you ever have. They've got, Chris, you said it, this is the highest budget they've ever contemplated. But they are Veruca Salt, combined with a little bit of Marie Antoinette.
Right. The
reality is they need to be reminded in every communication from the folks that said no, on the left, the right, and anywhere in between. Yeah. To govern is to choose. You guys have now been told by the voters in a very, very clear, loud, and articulate way, no. You will spend within your means. You will go back to the basics, fix the things that the charter says you're supposed to deal with, and then you can talk about all the other wonderful, magical, mystery things that the city of Tucson would like to do in their wildest dreams. But until you get the basics done, nothing else matters.
And Bill, you hit it right on the head. And there was 2 things that you said that I want to highlight. One is you have to live within your means, and that means you have to set priorities. When Mike Ortega became the city manager, 8+ years ago, there was a budget crisis. They had a huge shortfall, and his advice then, and he said that with me on the radio as well as now, is you have to tighten your belt strings, and you have to follow your North Star. And when asked what the North Star was, he said it's the charter. So you have to take a look at that. But the other piece that I think is very important.
I thought it was Noam Chomsky, but keep going.
The other part that you said that was very important that we need to remember is, one, they've asked for input. So let's make sure we give it to them. We have to show up. You have to be at the meeting. Sometimes where we, the collective we as the business community, or I'll just speak for SLC, where we fail is not showing up and reminding them, because it does get old. It does get hard. But the thing is, now we've got to make sure the message was sent by the community, not by us, not by anybody else, but by a combined community loud and clear. And now we have to show up in every communication, in every opportunity. And we've got to make sure that they understand it's important that not everybody can just show up at community outreach meetings. It doesn't work that way.
I believe the only input they're going to receive is if a Democrat can beat one of these people in a primary. Until that happens...
Do you know anybody running for one of those seats?
Jesse Lugo is a good friend of mine, and he's running for the Richard Fimper seat. We're actually doing we have two wonderful things. March 31st, we're doing a fundraiser for Jesse at the St. Philip's Plaza, and then the next day it's Arizona Gives Day, live remote breakfast. We'll get you tickets for that too, for Arizona Gives Day. So, Bill, thank you for your input, and happy triple day for you. We'll see you tonight at the St. Patrick's Day party.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Happy birthday, Bill.
7:29 in the morning, 10:29 on the East Coast. To you East Coasters, you're on the Live the Dream Media Network with Ted Maxwell, Christopher DeSimone. It's the 77th annual St. Patrick's Day show. Brother Joe coming up at the top of the hour. You're on the Live the Dream Media Network.